like to welcome everybody to the latest edition or episode of Inside the Doctor's Lounge. I'm your host, Dr. Desmond Bell, and welcome to a place where we can talk about any number of topics, just like what goes on inside a real doctor's lounge. You know, it's that area of mystique, what goes on behind that door, and really the conversations vary just like the people inside. So with that, we want to have some fun today. And we're really honored to have a special guest with us today, Dr. Shikha Jain, to go along with our regular colleagues here, Rhonda Crow, the CEO and founder of MD Coaches, Dr. Randy Cook, who also hosts an outstanding podcast, Prescription for Success, and my buddy, Dr. Rick Zollinger, who also does a podcast called Pickin' and Puttin'. May as well give you a little plug on there.
Oh, there you go.
Shikha, welcome. It's so great to have you here with us today. And again, we're going to talk about whatever pops in our head. You know, we'll get some things started. You know, one of the things I wanted to talk about, and we'll talk about your background too throughout the course of this and why you're doing some of the things you're doing. But I'm fascinated by your name. Okay. And I say that coming from a place as a kid growing up in northern New Jersey. My dad was from Ireland originally, and people would always botch up my name. I mean, I got to the point where I would answer to anything, you know, just because Desmond, I come to find out, I used to hate my name when I was a kid because I get picked on for it or whatever. And then I started learning about where the roots of it came from and what it meant. And just so I don't spoil the fun here, it means man from South Munster, which it could have been something a lot better, but, you know, we'll take that. But anyway, so I'm just fascinated because I love this kind of stuff. But what does your first name mean? I'm assuming it's a Hindi name, and do you know the background of it?
Yeah, it is. It's funny because I was just having a conversation with someone else about this. So if you meet somebody who knew me from the time I was born until college, they would pronounce my name Shikha. Even my brother still calls me Shikha. And then in college, I had some friends who said, that's not how you pronounce your name. It's actually Shikha. And that's what my parents call me. They call me Shikha, but I never corrected anyone because I just figured it doesn't matter. But so if you meet anybody who's met me from college on, they all call me Shikha. Actually, my second year of college on, they all call me Shikha. Up through my first year of college, everyone called me Shikha. So that's a fun fact about me. But my name actually means peak of a mountain. And so I think that it's very suited to me. My brother makes fun of me because I say that, but I like where it came from. And I always like when people ask me what it means, because I think that there is so much behind people's names and kind of their personalities and where they come from. And it's so important for me, especially to make sure that we pronounce people's names correctly, if
Yes.
we can. And I think that is, it's a part of who we are. And so thank you for asking that.
Well, you're welcome. And I think, you know, our names can shape us in a sense, but sometimes, you know, look at, I mean, your name, you know, you're kind of at the peak of a profession and at a really young age too. I will say, you know, for your age, what you've accomplished now is really not only commendable, but you know, you've been given some real gifts, and I know you're using them for the betterment of many. So
thank you so much for saying that. I appreciate it.
Well, it comes from a good place. But anyway, you know, just as we're kind of getting going here in our discussion too, one of the groups that you're serving obviously is women, and being a woman in medicine. I think it's important to have a discussion about some of the things that you're working on and why your career path is sort of taking this little, I don't want to say a detour, but certainly not maybe where you started out. You know, when you that first day in med school, you know, none of us could have imagined where we would be. But your Women in Medicine conference and your whole, let's say, foundation or your mission, can you please kind of get into this a little bit?
Yeah, it's actually really interesting how it all happened. I have always been an advocate for equality and equity. That's just been who I am ever since I was a kid. My parents joke, even to now, where if my brother and I don't get equal things, I get upset. Like if he gets more of a cookie than I do, I mean, we are adults and I still get upset over those things. So for me, it's a part of my nature. It's a part of who I am, and it's how I was raised. A couple of years ago, I struggled with many of the similar barriers that many other women have faced in medicine. I always thought that they were because I wasn't enough. I thought I wasn't good enough. I thought that I had, I was making mistakes. I thought I was being punished because, it was obviously something that I had done. It was my fault. And in some cases, absolutely, I needed to improve on myself. I needed to be better. And there were things that I needed to change, as any physician in training would need to do. But the more I kind of talked to other people, after I became a mom, after I started talking to other women, I realized that a lot of the challenges and barriers that I had faced weren't specific to me, and they were things that I shouldn't have had to deal with. And it was mind-boggling to me. I grew up in a house, my dad is a surgeon. He treated me and my brother equally, although my brother sometimes got more cookies than I did. We were treated equitably. And I grew up thinking that this is medicine. In healthcare, we're objective. We treat people the same. So the thought that any of these barriers that I was facing or challenges that I was facing were not because of something that I needed to improve was like an eye-opener. So after I delivered my daughter, I was still a fellow at that time. When I was an attending, I found out I was pregnant with twins. And I realized through social media, especially, that there were so many other women who were facing similar things. I found some amazing mentors and sponsors. And I decided, I live in Chicago where we have 5 phenomenal academic institutions. Why do we not have a conference dedicated to this very important topic? And so the Women in Medicine Symposium at that time was born. That was 3 years ago. And then last year, I branched it out even further to make it the Women in Medicine Summit. And last year was the first year of the summit where it was had an international feel because we had some international speakers and attendees. And we had over 425 people in attendance. We had 16 million impressions on Twitter in 48 hours. And it became a really great place, I think, for people to learn about the inequities that exist and then learn skills, professional and personal development, find mentoring and networking opportunities. And we created this forum and this space where people were not only able to learn and improve upon themselves, but were also able to learn when barriers were being put in place that were not okay and that weren't because somebody wasn't good enough. We also were able to provide opportunities for people. One of our medical students was invited to speak at Grand Rounds because of her involvement in the Women in Medicine Summit, and she'd never given a talk at a Grand Rounds before. Other people found research collaborations or new jobs. Someone reached out and told me they were able to negotiate for a higher starting salary for a new leadership position. So we were able to create this conference that has now expanded to beyond just a conference and has become kind of a year-round networking, connection, research, academic and non-academic way for women in medicine to really connect and find ways to navigate their careers.
Nice. So now you just in covering that, and that's outstanding. We've got, there's an obvious question that I have, going back to some of the inequities that you experienced. Can you give me like 1 or 2 examples of this? And the reason I'm asking this too, and just forgive me while I get this out there, I grew up in a house full of women, and my first residency directors were women. I have nothing but the highest regard and respect for women. I don't see them as a gender. I see them as my colleagues or as my peers, or it never crosses my mind to either look down or belittle or have even some kind of subliminal feeling that they're inferior to me. It just doesn't compute. So I'm just wondering, in this day and age, how this is still, prevalent or to the extent that we feel this need that we have to constantly be pushing this.
I'm so glad you asked that. So I could give you examples that would last like hours and hours, but I'll just give you a couple that I think are the most obvious, because you make a really good point where a lot of people don't experience these things or don't see these things. My husband, who I love dearly and is a wonderful person and is also a physician, he told me when I started doing all these things, he said, I don't understand why you need to do this. What challenges are you facing that, your male colleagues aren't facing? Now, at this point, him and I have known each other since medical school, and he and I had talked and things had happened to me, and I would tell him this had happened, and he was like, that kind of stuff never happens to me. Maybe it's because of this, or maybe it's because of this reason. And we, both of us together, would sit down and try to brainstorm why these things were happening. And both of us didn't realize at that point that it was a gender thing. Now, he actually attended both years, the symposium and then the summit. After he attended, he told me, he said, I had no idea that all of these other people across the country are having the same issues you did, and it's not because of something they did. And it was like an eye-opening experience for him. And this is somebody who, he is one of my biggest champions. I mean, he believes that, women and men are equal, and he is a champion for it. And he has seen these things, even though they were happening in front of him. So
can you share a specific, like a really nail one?
I'll give you two or three. So one actually happened when he and I were dating. We were in med school, and somebody came up to him, and I was considering being a surgeon at that point because my dad is a surgeon and I love surgery.
Sure.
And this one was more overt, where a surgery resident came up to him and said, you need to stop dating her if she wants to be a surgeon, because there's absolutely no way that your marriage is going to survive. And actually, you probably shouldn't date her if she wants to be a doctor at all. I'm marrying this woman who's not in the medical field because I need somebody who's going to be home taking care of me and making sure that dinner is on the table. So that was a very overt thing. And that happened, that was like 15 years ago. More recently, when I found out I was pregnant with twins, an older gentleman who considers himself to be very equitable put his hands on my belly and said, well, this wasn't supposed to happen. What are you going to do now? And I said, well, I'm a woman and I'm pregnant and that happens. So I'm not sure what your question is. It was just very awkward. And I think he was trying to be funny, but the way he implied it was, you're a new attending, you're not supposed to get pregnant when you're just starting a practice. What were you thinking? I had another person who also considers himself to be very much an advocate for women. We were in a meeting and I had spearheaded an initiative. I had conceptualized it. I'd done all of the work for it. It was my initiative. And we were sitting down and talking about how we were going to go out and promote it. And he told me, Shikha, I know you've worked really hard on this and you've done 99% of the work, but we don't just want another pretty face out there. So we're actually going to have this senior male physician be the one who is promoting and talking about the conference. And at the day of this event, you won't be leading. He'll be up there introducing people and doing all of the things that I thought I would be doing because I was the one who put all the work in.
You did the work, yeah.
And the two comments that were made, one was, we don't just want another pretty face out there. And the second was, well, think of it like a research paper where you're junior and the other person's going to get all the credit. And I said, but they've done none of the work. I'm going to have to teach them everything about what we put into this. And they said, well, that's your job. So, these are just a couple of examples. I've had people tell me not to go up for leadership positions because I should be focusing on my kids at home. I was interviewing for a job and someone told me, this gentleman actually told me, because it was a part-time position and I wasn't sure if I was interested in part-time. And he said, well, we want you to stay part-time because we're assuming you're going to want to have more children. And so we want to make sure we give you the flexibility to be at home for your family. And I said, but I'm capable of balancing, my life and my work, and no one's asking my husband these questions. So why does it matter if I want to have more children? And he said, well, you're a woman. And so we're just assuming you're going to take maternity leave and you're going to need time off and you're going to want to be part-time.
And when did this happen?
I was going to say something too.
That was when I was looking for my first job out of fellowship. So that was about 5 years ago that happened.
I'm shocked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're pointing out some really interesting things that I think are easy for me to overlook. And that is, when you talk about creating equality, people tend to focus on the numbers, and there's no question that the numbers of women in medicine have increased. But clearly there are some things to think about way beyond the number of women around. And this is really profound. I'm enjoying this.
I would I grew up the same way you did, and in a surgeon's family. And I would be two things that interested me. One was, what is your father? What is the interaction that he feels about this? Because if he's of art ilk, maybe he never felt that way, you know, in terms of dealing with you as a younger colleague. And then the other question I had was, when you have your meeting, have you thought about, I know how you got it going, but have you included now, bring the men into it to initiate some education so that these guys go back to those 40 million Twitter followers and tell what you're thinking? I mean, I you know, that's just me there, but.
I am so glad you asked that, and I will tell you why. So there's two things that you brought up. So one, my dad. So my dad is my original he for she champion. I would not be where I am today without my parents. They very much instilled in me and my brother from the day we were born that you can do anything you want to do. And I mean, I don't like using the phrase "they raised me as a boy" because I think that is gendered and kind of silly, because you can't really, I mean, they raised me to believe that I could do anything. And they raised me to believe that my gender should never stand in the way. Physiologically, of course, if I wanted to have children, that should be weighed into my career planning, but not in a way that should make me think that I can't go up for leadership positions, or in a way that I cannot be treated.
That's just crazy. You know, women have been in the workplace having kids, raising families my mom worked my whole life I was a little boy. You know, she sold wedding gowns. And so I just learned, you know, as a kid, you learn that that's part of the reason I guess I grew up respecting strong women, because she used to go into New York City and deal with guys in the garment district, for crying out loud, and haggle with them. And I used to go along once in a while too. But, you know, so your point, it's like some of these things, it's not unique just to medicine. I think these are some more norms of society that are still being, unfortunately, some of the examples you gave were just like, sound like, well, that's just plain dumb, you know, like somebody's opinion, which they're entitled to. And the touching of the belly, good Lord, how many pregnant women does that happen to? Pretty much all of them. And they don't realize, most people don't realize, they don't mean anything by it. They're just trying to, you know, have a conversation, I guess, and it's in their own little awkward way. Not to diminish what you were saying here in any means. These are just like bigger things at work here too, it seems.
What I meant was, what your dad being of the same profession and being that guy, what sage advice did he give you? Like my age, probably your dad's probably in my ilk. What did he say? What did he say? Well, this is how you need to deal with this. Or
so I'll tell you, it's been a challenge, because he is my biggest, like I said, mentor and sponsor, and I go to him for everything. And he has helped me navigate in many, many ways. I mean, there are some things that I can't even talk about because they were so egregious that I can't even like bring myself to talk about them, where I would call my dad and say, this just happened, what do I do? And so, I mean, I really like where I was so flustered and overwhelmed, and it takes a lot to fluster and overwhelm me. And I just didn't know what to do. And so he approaches it from, you know, the senior level of, well, this is probably what they were thinking. This is who you need to go to. This is how you need to navigate this. There's some where he hasn't been able to help me, where he says, this is just egregious.
I'll bet that was such an eye-opener for him too, probably because he's been at the height of his career for years. And like you're saying, he knows how the system works, and he's just hasn't really been affected. And yet here, one of the loves of his life is just being hammered. And it's like, as a dad, I would think a part of me would just be furious too.
Oh, he's definitely been furious before in some of the things that have happened. And I mean, my dad is a leader in his field. I mean, he is known nationally. He's been the president of, I can't even tell you how many different organizations. And he's very well respected. And so he has advised many other women and men through their careers. And one thing my dad has always taught me is that if he doesn't know the answer, if I don't know the answer, we go to somebody who does. And so
Yes.
he has a very great network of people who have helped me. So going back to the other question that Richard asked was about bringing men to the table. So part of the reason that I created this summit the first year was to have all these women there, because there are more than 50% of women entering medical school, and there's less than 20% who are department chairs, which is not okay. Women are promoted slower, they're given awards less, they're given smaller grants, and this is all objective data. Women are paid less, they're paid 80 cents on the dollar. I mean, this is, again, objective data when they're doing the exact same amount of work, working the same number of hours. So that's why I created the summit. This year, when we were supposed to be in person, we created a he for she track, which is targeted at men. And the reason we created this track was because I have had conversations with so many men who want to be allies, or who are allies, or who think they are helping, but they either don't know how, or the things that they're doing aren't working, or they just need new strategies, because this is a systemic issue. And the majority of people in leadership positions are men. And so things aren't going to change without men first acknowledging the fact that this is a problem, and then two, coming up with strategies for how to solve these problems. And I will say, so we created this he for she track. Now, obviously, with the summit being virtual, we're still having the track. It's going to be a virtual half-day session. And we have men coming from around the country who are department chairs, who are directors of cancer centers, who are leaders in their fields, because they want to learn from these experts, how can we create not only a more equitable work environment, but how can we change our system to allow these brilliant young women who are falling off of the pipeline, who are ambitious and excited and ready to work and working hard, but we're losing them somewhere along the way. And so we're losing some of our brightest minds, because, I mean, I will tell you, mentally for me, it has been rough going through a lot of these things. And there have been many days where I have debated leaving medicine. I have debated leaving healthcare. I've debated not doing this summit. I have had so many challenges that if I did not have the support system that I have, if I did not have my dad and my husband and my mom and my kids and the mentors and sponsors that I have in my life, I very easily could have taken the path of, forget this, I'm either leaving academic medicine or I'm leaving medicine altogether. And so men are coming, and I'm hoping more men register. We still have a couple more weeks until the summit happens. I'm hoping that more men come, because mentoring and sponsoring women is important, and it's imperative so that we don't lose these incredible women who just get burned out and who just feel like the barriers are too much and too great. And, you know, I've taken away so much time from my family to do all of these things. At some point, I question, why am I doing this? Why am I doing all this hard work that's unpaid? It's, you know, it's not that you get promoted because of the things that I'm doing. I'm not doing them for my own career. I'm doing them to help others. But at what point do I say the barriers are too much, the struggle is too hard, and I don't want to do this anymore? And there's a lot of women who have reached that point very early in their career, sometimes later, and we're losing amazing women.
Let me ask you a question. So I think the conference is awesome. So how, with your social media presence, which is outstanding, what, you know, when you're talking about the under 40 crowd, but these people that you're talking about, the 50 to 60-year-old, the professors, the whatever, they're not getting on Twitter. So what social media wise, or is it via the younger staff through Twitter and LinkedIn, or I don't see Instagram. I'm not sure how that phases, but it seems to me it's Twitter and LinkedIn maybe. But how do you go after that clientele?
So a lot of it is word of mouth. There are especially women, there's a lot of senior faculty women who are on social media who have utilized it to spread the word to the departments. For example, at Yale, one of my colleagues at Yale told her department chair about it. He didn't know about the conference, but when she told him about it, he basically said, I want to pay for our faculty to attend, and they're paying for multiple faculty to attend. So some of it is word of mouth. Some of it is email. So we've sent out emails to, people, and our steering committee is quite large. So we've asked our steering committee members to send out personal emails inviting people to attend. We have partnerships and sponsorship and in-kind agreements with groups like the American College of Physicians in Illinois. AMWA has been disseminating information. Helio has been doing quite a bit of advertising for us. We published a compendium with Wiley. So that's something that the Wiley audience has been able to access. So the good thing is a lot of people feel this is an important topic and it's a timely topic. So we've had a lot of really amazing support from organizations that have spread the word to their members through their mailers or through their, their email listservs. So I think that's how we're targeting some of the generation that's not necessarily on social media.
Okay.
I want to shift gears a little bit because, you of all people in the specialty that you serve in as a hem-oncologist, you don't need constant reminders of how precious life is and how short, things can really be. And yet here you are, this alpha personality in a sense. I always, one of my favorite sayings is, you want something done, you find the busiest person in the room. and you kind of fit that bill. And yet listening to you speak, I hear a part of you that is as important as your work is to you, and you understand how important it is and how many people are going to be impacted by it. There's still a part of you that is still experiencing frustration to the point that you've considered giving up medicine or are looking for another thing. So it's like, questions I have for you is like, how do you find a balance? And what motivates you, or what kind of triggered you to finally say, okay, I'm going to keep forging ahead and not, we all have weak moments, but how did you get to that point and come up and decide that this was the right way to go and that you were going to go all in?
So there's a couple of things that I do. So one, I have a 6-year-old daughter. So oftentimes I look at her, and whether she goes into medicine or not, I want her life to be amazing. I want her and my sons, I want all 3 of them to have an incredible life where they feel that they can do everything and anything they want. I mean, my 6-year-old right now wants to be everything. That is her job description. She's going to be everything. And I want her to feel that way for the rest of her life. I don't want her to feel that she's limited because of who she is and because of her gender. And I want my sons to be champions for equity. So that's one way that I kind of dig deep and I say, well, I'm making the world hopefully a better place for my kids. I get emails periodically from people who I've impacted, and I keep them in a list that I call my awesome list, that when I'm really feeling down, I will check it out and I will look at it and say, okay, so some things I do make a difference, even though there are other people who, you asked for examples earlier. I've had people come up to me and tell me, what you're doing is a waste of time. You're wasting your life. Stop doing this work and focus on something else because this is dumb. Like I've actually had a colleague, a physician, come up and tell me, this is dumb. When you're done with this side project of yours, tell me when you want to be a serious academician.
And again, that's just another opinion. And you know what? You take it with a grain of salt.
Where do these people come from?
Can I ask?
I can't believe I'm hearing this.
Was that male or female colleague?
It was a male. And the challenge, I'll tell you, the challenge that happens is what's happened to me and what's happened to a lot of other women is several colleagues will get together and they will decide that what you're doing is not important, and they will create, I don't want to call it a gang, but they'll create a group of people who will work against your mission.
Block you.
Yeah.
They ought to find something better to do with their time, first of all. I've run a nonprofit.
If it quacks like a duck, it's a gang. So you go ahead and call them whatever you like.
Shikha, I started a nonprofit organization a number of years ago. And I would stop and say, this is like the most irrational thing I've ever done. There's no reason to do this except that it's the right thing to do. So you just keep, one of my favorite quotes, and I've mentioned this to the guys before, one of my favorite quotes is from Norman Vincent Peale. You lead with your heart and the rest will follow. And you just keep going. And you just, that little voice that you answer to, not the psycho one that we all have in our head. No, but seriously, that voice that is kind of your compass, your moral compass, or whatever the things that your parents instilled in you too, as well as those other gifts that you've received. That's why you just keep going with it, and you just don't. You're going to have detractors wherever you go, and I look at it at this point in my life. That's their problem. I could care less.
There's a quick story, and the other guys have heard it before, Shikha, but I have 4 kids, but one of them is in a wheelchair. And I would tell you, with the kids, the greatest gift that the other 3 adult kids got was they are absolutely colorblind to disability. So if they go up and they see a kid in a wheelchair, they say, "Hey, you want to throw the football?" They don't see the wheelchair. And so when your kids are young like that, everything you do to protect them and grow them, open up like that is wonderful. I don't know where I was coming with that story, but it just made me think of your kids. Kids are smart. They figure it out, and they want to be everything, and you should let them be everything they want until they're 12, and then tell them no.
And then you're going to be wrong until about they're 25 anyways.
Yeah, maybe 30.
They come back about them. But what Shikha was just talking about, that example, I think that's a stellar example that you just shared. That happens frequently when you were talking about how colleagues can somewhat group together and create the wall so that you can't move forward unless you are, to use your name, peak of the mountain, or powerful, or have a very strong core. It's not hard to discourage someone, and so many great ideas die on the vine because of that kind of behavior. So if your summit does nothing but bring some light to that kind of ridiculousness out there, so be it. I think it's a good thing, and I'll cheer you on.
Yeah, that's a great point, Ron. Your mom knew. She picked the great name for you. Must have known something.
Doesn't mean the road's easy, though.
Yeah, but
no, it's not. It does not mean it's easy. And there's going to be all sorts of, there are going to be so many times where you just feel like you're beating your head against the wall. And does not anybody else see this? Or why do I feel like I'm the only one who seems to care about this? All those emotions will inevitably creep in, and you just you keep moving forward.
Yeah, but it's grassroots too, because a bunch of old fogies like the 3 of us, not including Rhonda. But it's an eye-opener for us, because the 3 of us felt, like she said, we felt like we were God, I just can't imagine going up and doing any of those things to her as a colleague. So that's that's us. So maybe opening our eyes to that helps her with her educational program.
Yeah, you sort of assume if you don't have that attitude, nobody else does. But it sounds like there are good guys and bad guys, and I'm glad I'm on this team, frankly.
Well, what's so interesting is when you have these conversations with men like you who are equitable and who believe in this type of thing. What these types of conversations and these type of conferences actually do is they open your eyes to things that exist that you might not have seen before, that are implicit biases that are they call them microaggressions, which I think that a lot of times people think that the challenges that are happening are overt. They're obvious. So I'll give you an example. So we published a paper on introductions of speakers at the American Society for Clinical Oncology. And women were more likely to be introduced by first name, and men were more likely to be introduced by title. And that is a big deal. And the people who were doing the introductions weren't thinking that they were being, sexist or that they were doing anything wrong. Maybe they knew the woman and they didn't know the man, or maybe, there was all sorts of different reasons why people have given when these types of studies come out. But those types of naming practices, so calling a woman by her first name and calling a man doctor, that puts them in different categories.
Yeah,
sure
that's
does.
a great point.
Sure does.
It's subtle. It's like body language too. Little cues that they're not, maybe they're probably not even conscious. It's just, got a lot of work to do.
Well, it demonstrates how subtly it creeps into the culture.
For sure. I mean, look, in advertising, there's subliminal cues and little messages that are there, that are planted there intentionally. I was a psych major. I'm fascinated with like how people behave in this. But so one of the questions I had for you too, Dr. Jain. We're all colleagues.
There you go.
I stand corrected. No. What? One of the things. So I don't know if it's so much a question, but it's an observation. So, and maybe this is a challenge that comes with what you're trying to accomplish too. Is you're covering a really important area, but how do you get this message conveyed to your target audience, let's say women in particular, without them, without bestowing, let's say, a victim mentality too, because you don't want to promote that either. The three of us, these three old guys here, we're kind of like, no, we already respected you. We already believe in you. We are here by your side. And why maybe we don't say anything, because we already accepted you, and we appreciate your strength and your intellect, all these things that are important. All the other stuff is background noise. So, but how do you do this so that we never want to feel sorry for ourselves? Life is not fair, and we have to just keep plugging, and that, but is this something you've even considered?
So that's why we call this Women in Medicine Summit an evolution of empowerment, because this isn't about feeling bad for ourselves. And I've made the point from the very beginning, this is not a group of women getting together to complain. That's not what I believe in. That's not what I think is important. I think we complain to our friends. I complain all the time to people, but that's not what this summit is about. This summit is about getting skills and professional and personal and leadership development and advancement, and finding ways to change the system. And it's coming up with strategies to fix a system that is really inequitable. I mean, it is at every single level. And part of it is because medicine in itself is a hierarchical system. And so there are barriers that have been put in place that need to be changed, period. Like, there's not a question about that. I think the really important thing, especially, the three of you Caucasian men who are, allies, I think you hit the nail on the head where you said, we don't really say anything. We don't talk about it because we just think of you as equal. I think a big reason for bringing men to the conversation is because in order for things to change, we need men like you to not just say, well, we're equal, we're not going to talk about it. It's got to be, you identify it and you call it out, because you have that position of privilege where you can call something out. So I'll give a perfect example. When you're sitting in a meeting and, there's 3 men and 3 women, and Jennifer gives an idea, and Jennifer says her idea, and then 5 minutes later, Tom says the same idea, but rephrases it. And everyone's like, oh, Tom, that's a great idea. I mean, that happens all the time. So what you can do, instead of sitting there and saying, well, Jennifer thought of the idea, but Tom brought it, let's just keep moving with it. You can say, hey, Jennifer, that was a great idea you brought up a few minutes ago. Tom, Thank you for explaining it in a little bit of a different way. Jennifer, do you have anything else to add to the idea that you proposed? And that is the easiest way many of us call it being an upstander, not a bystander, where you can actually not just be somebody who knows that women are equal and should be treated equal. You can make sure that you are standing up when these types of things happen in front of you.
And I appreciate that. And I guess maybe what I was really trying to say, it's not that we're not saying anything, but it's like living through actions versus words. It's like, I can say, oh, I love you. But if I don't show it, if I really don't do it through my actions, then the words are meaningless. So when I say that we are by your side and we've been your advocates all along, that's what I'm really referring to. And if somebody were in a meeting like that, sure as hell, of course I'm going to give credit where it's due. I'll call somebody out for that in a heartteut. Because I'm at the stage of my life, I don't really care. It's like, I don't care. I'm not worried about the repercussions from the guy who's trying to steal somebody's thunder. It's just the wrong thing to do.
What I was going to say, too, I have a daughter who's probably not far off your age, and she's an executive in Charlotte with Campbell's. and Campbell Soups, and it was whatever her company was bought, but that's who she works for, and she's fairly high up, but she hits a ceiling with the same issues you're talking about. And of course, I'm your dad to her, and yeah, I'm going, well, hit him upside the head with a hammer. I mean, so I think what I'm getting at is this crosses business too for women.
Oh.
This is not medicine. This is women in law.
Absolutely.
Oh, I can tell you everything she's talked about I've experienced.
Oh,
yeah.
And I'm just too bullheaded. I don't listen to it. I just keep pushing through.
I still have, this is like 30 years ago. My sister graduated from the School of Visual Arts in New York, and she had a portfolio of ads that she had put together. So as this little game that they would play, she had to go for interviews. They'd make her leave her portfolio there for a couple weeks. And man, wouldn't you know, then you start seeing some of her ads popping up in print or on TV. And you talk about feeling violated.
Yeah.
So, I never forgot that, just knowing what my sister felt like too.
Well, I'll tell you, Desmond. So it's interesting because, like my husband lives with me, obviously. And I am doing this work quite a bit. So he hears about it. He told me the other day, he said, I didn't even recognize a lot of the things that were out there. He said, so it's one of those things where, yeah, he believes women are equitable. He told me I ruined TV for him because he was watching a show that we'd watched before. We were watching a show that we'd watched before and we loved the show. And he turned to me and he goes, why are there no women in leadership in the show? And I told him, I said, that's a great question. And he's like, I can't watch this anymore because now all I'm thinking of is, well, she should have been promoted. Why wasn't she promoted? But when we watched this show 5 years ago, he's like, I didn't think of anything about this. I loved this show. So I think there's some things, like I said, that are overt, like your sister having her thing stolen or someone stealing an idea in a meeting. But the majority of these things that happen, they are so subtle. I didn't even realize they were happening to me until, again, I started doing this work and I realized I wasn't given this opportunity because of this reason. I was told, I could talk for hours on all the things that I was told.
So, every problem has a solution. So give me like 3 obvious problems that we can start solving. That actually have a real solution that we could work for, versus just saying, well, there's inequities. Well, we know that. We've established that. But let's hone in on a couple like key points that we can start to really rally around and make change for.
Absolutely. So number 1, mentoring and sponsoring women and identifying women who are ambitious and who have that leadership potential, because women are often over-mentored and under-sponsored, and they're even under-mentored. So identifying those women who are really, ambitious and who have the potential, and even finding those women who you may not automatically think this is somebody who would be a leader, and helping them become the best that they can be, because men get it all the time. They get it on the golf course. They get it when you're out having beers. Women oftentimes aren't even invited to these social events where men are given opportunities, and women just aren't at the table because they weren't invited to the social event. So that's number 1, intentionally finding these and mentoring and sponsoring women. Number 2, we need to do better at supporting women when they decide to have a family. Women physiologically get pregnant if that's what they want to do, if that's what they're able to do, and they will need to take some time off to give birth. That is a physiologic necessity if you are going to deliver a child. So we need to not only provide maternity leave, but when women come back to work, we need to have supports in place where, maybe a 6 a.m. meeting isn't going to be possible because she's got to drop somebody off at school or has got to do daycare. There need to be, and to be honest, men oftentimes just say, well, I can't come because I'm dropping my kid off at school. And people say, oh my gosh, the dad is dropping them off. And then a woman says, I can't come because I have to drop my daughter off at school. And they say, where are your priorities? So I think it needs to be a mind shift change. And we need to, and this is not only for women who physiologically deliver, but women who have surrogates or women who adopt. We need to find a way to integrate that into the way that we advance women, the way we support women. And I think the third, and this is the most important, is we need to focus on the fact that this is a systemic issue, and it needs to be leaders who are intentionally looking at the changes that need to be made from a system level. One great example I have, I sat down with the CEO of this very large hospital who is brilliant, and he is the biggest gender equity advocate you could imagine. He told me he'd created a search committee to look for a new president of their institution. He could not find somebody who was not a Caucasian male, and he couldn't figure out why everyone was looking exactly the same. Great candidates, but he said there was no diversity that was coming across his table. He said he realized his entire search committee was made of men, and he disbanded the committee, put it together again with women, underrepresented minorities, and a more diverse group. And he got a whole new slew of CVs of people who he'd never even heard of, who were equally, if not more qualified. And he ended up hiring a woman who was an underrepresented minority who was more qualified than all of the male candidates that he'd be presented with first. So I think it really requires people to look internally and realize that all of us have implicit bias and unconscious bias that dictates how we live.
And you know, and I don't mean to cut you off, you know, also people tend to gravitate towards people that are similar to them too. It's a social psychology phenomenon. That's just people, that's their comfort.
Yep.
It's obviously when the deck is stacked like that with 5 guys on the committee, they're going to be tending to look for people that they know, who they understand how they might think or behave. So.
Well, I'll tell you, it happened to me. I find this story hilarious. So when I was creating the Women in Medicine Summit steering committee, I was so proud of myself. I had women from every field. I had them from multiple hospitals, multiple subspecialties. And somebody called me and said, you know, Shikha, there's a lot of Indian women on your steering committee. And I was like, that's so not possible. I don't know that many Indian women. And I looked, and my entire steering committee was Indian women, and I didn't even see it. Like, I literally did not even notice, because I was so proud that they were from different institutions, and some were surgeons, some were, you know, primary care, some were private practice, some were academics, but I hadn't realized that they were all Indian women. And so when someone pointed that out to me, I looked internally and I said, how did this happen? And then I started reaching outside of the circle of people who I had initially reached out to. And now we have an incredibly diverse steering committee. So this is not to say that you are a bad person. It happens to all of us. We just have to be mindful of it and realize that this is our own implicit bias in how we live our lives. And we need to be intentional in the people that we're seeking out.
Yeah, that's well stated. And, you know, it's always, life's more fun when you go outside your comfort level anyway. It's full of a lot more surprises, and it's so much more enriching too. You get so much more out of it. So listen, I know that you're kind of pressed for time right now, and you've been a gracious guest today. So as we're talking about the conference, please, if you'd like to, you know, give out any more information about the summit and, you know, how people can register for it, that type of thing, please go ahead. I'll give you the floor. And then I'm going to ask my colleagues to chime in one more time before we wrap it up.
Absolutely. So the Women in Medicine Summit this year is virtual. It's October 9th and 10th. You can register at www.womeninmedicinesummit.org. If you have a group of 5 or more, we have group discounts. And if you're an organization that wants to pay for 5 or more attendees from your organization, we will list you on the website as a friend of the summit. We have awesome t-shirts for sale. And we're doing a really cool networking session, networking happy hour on the Friday night, which is going to be very unique. It's going to be a networking session like you've never had before, where you'll actually get to interact with people on a personal level. If you're a man and you're interested in attending, or if you identify as non-binary, we absolutely encourage you to come. We have the he for she track. We also have fantastic programming the whole 2 days that you can attend. It's leadership development and professional and personal development that spans both men, women, and those who identify as non-binary. It's for everyone. So please register if you have any interest. It is CME, and the recordings will be available for a year if you register. So if you can't make it to all of the sessions in that 2-day period, I know it's hard in the virtual space. So we are recording the sessions, and they will be available for you to look at a later time as well.
That's awesome. Any other final thoughts you wanted to throw out there too, besides the conference? Hope you had fun today.
I did. Thank you so much for having me on. I mean, I I've been doing this work for a few years, and I will say, you know, there are women and men who've been doing this work for decades. And, you know, people always use the phrase, I stand on the shoulders of giants. And I mean, there are some giants in this field who have made huge strides forward. I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to be able to do this type of work and hopefully make a difference. I want people to remember that we can move forward and we can close this gender gap in medicine and really in everything. There's a lot of resources out there. We're living through a pandemic right now, and there's a lot of concern that gender equity is taking steps back. So let's not let that happen. Let's keep moving forwards, and let's work towards making a more equitable world for all of us.
Amen to that. And I think when all's said and done, I think you'll be standing as one of those giants yourself. So thanks for all that you're doing. Rhonda, ladies first.
Well, I can underscore everything that Shikha has talked about here today. And I think out of the three things that you made as points, the mentoring, and I'm going to underscore sponsorship. It's one thing to mentor and to help with their skills. It's another thing when you use that word sponsorship, it means you're helping to find opportunity and you're helping to champion them to help them move forward. It's a more active role. And so I really like how you put that to sponsor.
Yes, absolutely. Dr. Cook, Randy.
Yeah, Shikha, I'm just going to take the opportunity to do a little cheerleading here. Pardon me just one moment.
Both have our cups.
Sorry. I promise it's coffee in there.
I can't make that same comment.
I can't help but be a little concerned when I hear you talk about your own discouragement. So what I want to do is be a little bit of a cheerleader here, and I want to remind you that what you're actually doing is it's historic in a way that has enormous proportions. What you're involved in is an acceleration of a very critical point in human evolution. You are undoing a way of life for female Homo sapiens that has been underway for a couple of 100,000 years. And what you're doing is so important that you will not live long enough to see the final result. But you must not be discouraged out of it, because what you're doing is so important that it needs to be done. And I can't think of a better person to do it than you. So keep up the good work.
Thank you so much, Randy. I appreciate that.
Dr. Z?
I'll just say, I'll be short. I'll just say I'm proud of you as a young woman. I think everything Randy said as you're approaching the mountaintop of your own name, I think it's great. I mean, you think back to how long this process, all of us have seen it, starting back with Gloria Steinem and Billie Jean King. Everybody steps on somebody else's shoulders to get there. And as Randy said, it may take time, but don't let anybody discourage you. Don't.
Never. Thanks for all those comments, team. And I will just echo those too. You know, we all have our mission, and you know, you've got some supporters right here, and we are here for you too. And if there's anything we can do individually, look, we're all a little bit older than you. You're probably a lot smarter than us, but we have the years on our side too. So, you know, there's certain things that do come with age, and you know, I don't know that it mellows you, but you kind of see things from different perspectives that maybe, you know, you wish you had that kind of background when you were 40 years old or 30. So, you know, again, and from my standpoint, my experience in running a nonprofit organization and the ups and downs that go with it, there are probably some parallels there too. So anyway, I'm sure any one of us are happy to be that kind of a mentor that you're even seeking for others. You know, we certainly, your talk made me reflect on some people in my life who I believe I'm trying to fill that role for them. So this is really encouraging to hear you say that. So thank you for that. So with that, I think it's time to wrap this up. It's been another great day inside the Doctor's Lounge. We hope you've enjoyed this. Again, you know, that little red button that you see on the screen, by all means, please subscribe and tell your colleagues, your friends, your family about what we're doing here. You get to be a fly on the wall and hear some conversations that you probably never would have been privy to or ever would have even imagined. So you never know where it's going to go. So for Inside the Doctor's Lounge, until next time, remember, and for MD coaches, for Randy's RX, our prescription for success, I'm Dr. Desmond Bell. Remember, we see you, we believe in you, and we're here for you. Until next time. A little while back, my good friend and colleague, Dr. Randy Cook, had a guest on his podcast, Prescription for Success, by the name of Dr. Shikha Jain. Dr. Jain, by training, is a hem-oncologist, but she's so much more. She is really one of the leaders in the move for gender equity, really addressing some of the issues that women in medicine face, not only today, but even moving forward. Our discussion started out and covered so many aspects of this, and certainly I wish we could have spent more time, because this is a really important area for discussion and certainly an area that change is required. I hope you enjoyed the talk today. As always, you know, Inside the Doctor's Lounge is a place where we can all come together and share ideas, and really in a fun way that's unscripted and mostly honest. So with that, I hope that you will certainly subscribe to our channel. See that little red button there, make sure you hit it, and keep coming back. Check out MD Coaches, that's mymdcoaches.com. As I mentioned, Dr. Cook's outstanding podcast, Prescription for Success. And until next time, Inside the Doctor's Lounge, I'm Dr. Desmond Bell, your host, and remember that we see you, we believe in you, and we're here for you.